I didn't discover it at all, by any stretch. It was something that people knew about. People who knew about tapestry knew about it. When I started work at this museum, I didn't know that we had it.
Max Bryant is a curator of European decorative arts at the Minneapolis Institute of Art. It wasn't until Max came here a couple years ago and was reading a catalog of tapestries from the 1990s that he realized where this famous tapestry was, just a few hundred feet away in storage.
Reading this, I was just so astonished that a work of this quality and importance would be at the museum. It's so early, this tapestry. It's early 16th century. There aren't Italian tapestries from that period in this country at all.
Max went and found the tapestry, rolled up like a sausage. One of the most remarkable artworks in the world, abandoned for the better part of a century.
I don't really know how this tapestry looks, and nor does anybody else, because nobody has seen it on display since the 1950s.
That is, until now. This is the Object Podcast, produced by the Minneapolis Institute of Art, now showing modern art and politics in Germany, 1910 to 1945, featuring 4 decades of art that trace the course of the German experience, from the experimental 1920s to the art bans of the Nazi era. The Object is made possible by generous support from Ameriprise Financial, a proud supporter of the Minneapolis Institute of Art and committed to the future of art and culture in the communities they serve. Ameriprise Financial, helping people feel confident about their financial futures since 1894. Today, a story about the extraordinary resurrection of an extraordinary artwork. You might even call it a renaissance. An artwork that opens a giant window onto one of the great creative moments in human history. A story of how great things come to be with all the messy, ugly, fascinating complications that follow humans wherever, whenever we are. I'm Tim Gehring. Let's go back to the late 1400s in Florence, where the Medicis run the show. How much do you know about the Medici family? How much do you want to know? First, you should meet Cosimo de' Medici, a banker who in the early 1400s becomes the original dark money man. Cosimo helps a guy become a cardinal and then a pope, and in return gets a contract for all the papal banking needs, which are many. But he also supports artists like Donatello and Fra Angelico. He finishes the famous dome atop the, Duomo in Florence by supporting an architect no one else has much confidence in. He builds the first public library in Florence and fills it with humanist texts from the classical era, helping launch the Renaissance. And somewhere along the line, Cosimo, or possibly his grandson Lorenzo, buys a plot of land from the church, the Garden of San Marco. Lorenzo loves the garden. He fills it with classical statuary and invites artists and poets to come study there. Eventually he adds some living quarters so they can stay a while, and it becomes a kind of school for rediscovering the ideals of classical Rome and Greece. Botticelli is a regular, as is Leonardo da Vinci, and later Michelangelo, who comes as a teenager and basically moves in. Now, the Medicis already have their hands full. Another banking family is conspiring to take over the papal finances, and the Pope is in on it. On April 26, 1478, at Easter Mass, Lorenzo and his brother Giuliano are attacked in the cathedral by priests. right in front of the altar. Giuliano is killed. Lorenzo escapes. The archbishop, whom the Pope had hoped would take over Florence from the Medicis, is captured and hung in a cathedral window. Florence loves its Medicis, apparently. Lorenzo remains the city's ruler, and is called Lorenzo the Magnificent. And by the mid-1500s, a new generation of Medicis is in charge, Cosimo I, which is a little confusing, but go with it. He's 17 when he becomes Duke of Florence, after the previous Medici Duke is assassinated. Cosimo I is also into art, at least in a competitive way, as yet another thing he can be the best at. And tapestry is the biggest game going. Now, let's talk about tapestry, which has fallen from favor over the centuries through no fault of its own. In the 1500s, though, tapestry is huge, in every possible way.
Tapestries could go very large because they could be rolled up, they could be stored and transported. And so tapestry was a medium in which people were working on a bigger scale than paintings at the time.
Raphael designed tapestries. Bronzino worked on tapestries. Da Vinci most likely designed the tapestry of his Last Supper composition.
Tapestry is the highest status art form. It is the art form of popes and kings and dukes and emperors. It's something that we know was esteemed above painting because of its position in inventories. Tapestry would always come first. Wherever it was in the house, the tapestry would be inventoried first. These things would cost vastly more than an equivalent painting. So the tapestries that are woven for the Sistine Chapel cost 10 times as much as Michelangelo's ceiling for the same space. So we're really dealing with an art form that we have to appreciate as being much, much more important than its current status in museums generally.
Which actually kind of is tapestry's fault. They haven't aged well for the most part, being made of light-sensitive thread. They die a little every time you show them, and people used to show them a lot. They're also big, and almost no one has that kind of space anymore, except for popes and kings and dukes and emperors. In the 1500s, there's a very powerful emperor who runs the Holy Roman Empire from Brussels in Western Europe, Charles V, who is really into tapestries for reasons.
The story that's told is that Charles V made his courtiers commission tapestries because it cost them so much money that then they couldn't spend that money raising armies to challenge him and his authority as Holy Roman Emperor. I don't know how true that is, but it definitely meant that these weavers of Brussels, which was the city that Charles controlled, were able to elevate the art form to these extraordinary heights.
Everyone's buying these Brussels tapestries, even the Medicis. And one day, Cosimo is like, no, fuck this. I want in on the action. Also, why is an Italian artist like Raphael designing tapestries for Brussels when he could be doing it right here? So, Cosimo reaches out to the best weavers in Brussels. The main guy we know, a weaver named Jan Roast, whose signature is a chicken roasting on a spit. A joke that somehow works as well in English as it does in Flemish. Roast taps about 15 other weavers to join him in Florence. People good at what they do, whoever they are.
Well, we know very little about them. They were Flemish weavers. The number of them, their names are lost to us, partly because Cosimo had to be very secretive about how he brought them over, because they had trade secrets of the Brussels factories. And so he was, in many ways, asking them to come and really not go back.
Cosimo gets his weavers.
He then does something that I think is even more brilliant, which is to actually found 2 workshops. So he's not going to trust just one to do this to the level of Brussels by themselves. He's going to set up 2 independently, and they're going to have to kind of compete with each other to be the best and outdo each other at their skill and weaving.
Naturally, he sets them up in the garden off the square at San Marco. They sit on a long bench, the weaving in front of them, working from a cartoon, as it's called, the artist's drawing that guides the weavers. And in 1546, for one of their first big projects, the weavers get a commission from a rich guy named Alemanno Salviati. The Salviatis have bought a 300-year-old palazzo in the heart of Florence, and palazzos have a lot of walls. Now, Alemanno Salviati has a brother in Rome who's a cardinal, and the cardinal trained this young painter named Francesco de' Rossi, who was apparently so grateful he changed his name to Francesco Salviati, which is confusing but apparently good for him. He travels all around northern Italy and Rome finding work, and then comes to Florence to work on frescoes in the Palazzo Vecchio, the castle-like tower in the heart of the city. He has worked on tapestries before, designing a set about Alexander the Great for a duke who is actually the illegitimate son of a pope. Well, was. He too is assassinated. Anyway, while Salviati is in Florence, he gets enlisted to design the tapestry for his namesake family. And it's no coincidence that the subject for this first big commission is Dante. In 1546, Dante is Florence's most beloved poet, even though he's been dead for 125 years. Even though he was exiled at 36 and was told he would be burned at the stake if he returned. Dante never did return to Florence. He spent the next 2 decades moving from place to place, writing the Divine Comedy as a kind of commentary on the corruption that forced him out. But Florence never forgot about Dante. Max says there may have been a challenge to Dante's poetic supremacy around the time that Salviati was designing his Dante tapestry. Petrarch, some people were saying, was the better poet. So the Medicis may have wanted to push back on that. Also, Dante famously wrote the Divine Comedy in Tuscan, his native language, and promoting the Tuscan tongue is another one of Cosimo's projects. But there is another possible reason the Divine Comedy is proposed for this tapestry. The Palazzo Salviati used to be the Palazzo Portinari, home to Beatrice Portinari. The Beatrice that Dante met at age 9 and again at 18. The Beatrice he would love from afar for the rest of his life, even after she died at age 24. In the Divine Comedy, Beatrice is living in paradise when she sends the Roman poet Virgil to save Dante, as though she had never forgotten him either.
The subject of Dante encountering Virgil is the key scene of the first canto of the Inferno. So it would make sense if you were trying this medium out to sort of start at the beginning of the poem, and maybe there could have been potentially further illustrations of subsequent cantos. But this really gives you the key event of the first canto in one image. He doesn't know who it is at first. He's being pursued by these animals. They're near his feet. They seem to be sort of subdued, possibly by the powers of this figure in the distance. And he's looking up at this figure expectantly. He's clutching his robes. He seems anxious. He's just emerged from this dark wood onto this sort of deserted slope, and he's about to be rescued and taken on this incredible journey through hell and purgatory and ultimately to paradise. In all the kind of illustrations of this scene in manuscripts up to that point, you can see that everybody has to make a decision about the physical relationship between these figures. Who's above, who's below? How would Dante have seen this figure? And this one is, I think, a very effective solution to the sort of puzzles of the text, because it means that Dante is looking up in anticipation at this mysterious figure in a way that very directly parallels the way that we look up at this enormous tapestry, with a similar kind of mix of awe and wonder.
When the Dante tapestry is finished, it's hard to know exactly how it goes over at the Palazzo Salviati. But the Cosimo workshop continues, which is a good sign. And Jan Roast, the chicken guy, has a 3-year contract that is renewed in 1549, also a good sign. But 5 years after that, in 1554, Cosimo shrinks the dual workshop thing to one. And while the Medicis keep producing tapestries well into the 1600s, the Golden Age is over. The Salviatis, too, begin to move away from Florence in the 1600s to Rome. And it's there that J.P. Morgan acquires the Dante. Morgan, who is a kind of latter-day king himself, loves tapestries. He often shows them at the Met in New York. But after Morgan dies in 1913, his son sells the Dante tapestry to French & Company, the premier dealers in tapestry. And somehow, before the sale is even announced, the tapestry is acquired by the Minneapolis Institute of Art.
So it seems as if there was some inside knowledge about the sale and the contents of the collection. But exactly what happened, I haven't been able to really figure out.
There is indeed someone with inside knowledge of Morgan's tapestries. Joseph Breck, who worked at the Met in the Decorative Arts Department before coming to Minneapolis in 1914 as the new museum's first director. And almost immediately, he acquires the Dante tapestry. Breck has only a few $1,000s to spend on art that first year, which doesn't go far. But luckily, there is someone else in Minneapolis who appreciates tapestries and Minneapolis.
The other person is Ella Martin. She purchased these tapestries at great expense for the museum. First 2 tapestries from the Pierpont Morgan collection. This one, this Dante tapestry, and also one that's known as the Falconers, which was an earlier tapestry, late medieval. She was a widow, her husband had died a few years before, and she must have seen in this new museum an opportunity to really contribute to the life of the city.
Breck puts the Dante tapestry in a gallery on the second floor of the museum, surrounded by paintings and furniture at the time. And there it hangs, more or less, for decades. Eventually, the museum seems to realize this is not sustainable. The tapestry goes to Detroit for one last exhibition in the 1950s, and when it comes back, it goes into storage. Once Max realized the museum had the tapestry, the question at first was not whether to display it, but how to display it at all.
It didn't have any kind of modern hanging system to put it on the wall, and it was something that I think wouldn't have been even something to consider without a big project of conservation. It would have damaged it immediately to hang it up in the way that it was hung up in the past.
So the museum got funding to conserve the tapestry from the Bank of America and TFAF, the European Fine Art Foundation. And this year, Beth McLaughlin, with the Midwest Art Conservation Center, did the work.
Conserving a tapestry is really the most complex possible project, because in an ideal world, one would somehow have the resources to reweave something in exactly the way that these pieces of silk that have fallen apart were originally woven. And that's not something that's desirable, really, not just because of how logistically unrealistic it is, but also reweaving is a kind of falsification of the reality of this work of art, in my opinion. The things that make it the highest status art object of the 16th century are the same things that make it incredibly hard to stabilize and conserve, which is the quantity of labor that went into it. What we've done is to really focus on making it displayable, stabilizing the condition.
It has a means of hanging now, and a place to hang. The only wall in the entire museum big enough.
It's big. It's 17.5 feet high. And there's just nothing of this scale that exists in America from the Italian Renaissance. It's bigger than any painting that has ever come to this country from 16th century Italy.
The tapestry will be up for roughly 6 months, which of course, with any tapestry, restarts the cycle.
The reality of all textiles in museums is that putting them on display does damage them. It damages them a tiny, tiny, tiny bit, but there's no way around the fact that displaying it means that part of its life is taken away. But we have to realize that this is a very, very small sacrifice for something that is incredibly rewarding, which is to encounter in person the art form of popes and kings and emperors. I think it's going to be a complete revelation to me and everyone else, really, who's maybe seen a picture of this in a book or seen a picture of it on the website, or even just seen the real thing laid out on the floor, because it's going to be on the wall vertically for the first time since the 1950s. It has no parallel, really, in this country. So I can't wait to see it.
This has been the Object Podcast, made possible with the generous support of Ameriprise Financial. You can see the Dante tapestry absolutely free at the Minneapolis Institute of Art beginning July 11. I'm Tim Gearing, and thanks very much for listening.